Yeah, I assume so.
The agenda?
It's all the information out there.
The list of,
That's extra info. That's just for you guys. Yeah. If you want to say, go ahead, if you don't.
we'll see how it goes. I don't plan to.
We ran out of chairs.
I have one here still and one there.
I think it. It's kind of a character. It'll-
Did you put on there as amended?
This isn't it. 24. Yeah, meaning this is the closed session. Regular meeting, council.
That's not our motion.
It's a regular meeting. Oh, yeah. Well, we already did the open to carry. And then, oh, yeah, okay, sorry. I hate, yeah, they presented. I hate it. The agenda presented to council as of.
I just invited somebody there. It'll be on you.
It's Devin now.
Thank you. Do you have the remote? Yeah, I wish. Do I have the remote?
Update the system so we can change it by our phones. Change it before we even get here.
Some benches.
You know how to pack a council chambers.
Yeah. Leave it down.
You dealt with fireworks. You dealt with fireworks.
Or putting these under the covered link.
Then I don't think we're gonna get into, we better not get into 10:30.
No.
Which I mean,
Like I could still put it on. I stopped filling it with the hose, hoping that made it. I think we lost it.
Are we ready?
You ready?
20 minutes, yes. Well, I don't know. Are you ready?
I think this is, I think Nick gave me this. wrong one. So I think it should be.
Well, no, I think you still have to open the regular council meeting and then we went in camera, right?
Okay, I think this should be 7, right?
No, we opened the regular council meeting at 5, right? Or it's just, yes,
We opened the regular meeting at
5:40.
Yes.
Is that done?
Yeah.
And do I read this?
I think,
To the disclosure of pecuniary interest, start there.
yeah, start at pecuniary interest. No, we have to do the agenda present council's 25th as amended.
Yes.
Yes, so yeah, start here.
Just right here. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our meeting tonight. I see we have a packed house and I'm very happy to see that. So we'll move forward with our meeting. We have a number of presentations, so to try and get everything in. We have an amended, we're going to give the adoption of the agenda as amended, moved by Councillor McGinnis, seconded by Councillor Featherstone, that this agenda as amended, presented to council and dated the 25th day of June, 2024, be adopted as prepared. And when I say it's as amended, we had on our agenda, we had a closed session to deal with labor relations. We opened it tonight at 5:40. And so therefore we have amended the agenda to proceed, and there won't be any closed session at the end of our meeting. All in favor? Carried. Any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof?
So thank you, Mayor Paquette. So while I don't actually have a conflict, I reluctantly feel it necessary to recuse myself from item 5, the short-term rental discussions. It's a privilege to serve as an elected official for Bonfield. Unfortunately, recent discussions have deviated far from productive dialogue. So I feel that this has become a distraction, which pulls focus from the main subject. And I really don't want that to happen. So I am one voice on council. I'm an independent thinker. I make my own decisions based on research, analysis, and listening to the perspectives of others. This issue isn't about one person or two people. It's about the community. And it certainly isn't new. It's been around for at least 3 years. So for the sake of the integrity of the process, I am removing myself from the conversation. This way, I think that will allow the discussion to proceed without perceived undue influence. Thank you, Mayor Paquette.
Thank you. Next, we have adoption of previous minutes, moved by Councillor Featherstone, seconded by Councillor McGinnis, that the minutes of the regular meeting, council meeting of June 11th and special council meeting of June 18th, 2024 be adopted as circulated. All in favor? Carried. Next, we'll have the presentations and delegations. We'll ask the individuals as they make their presentation to come forward and make the presentation and comment. Council will not be commenting on any of the presentations at this time. And I ask that as the presenter is at our podium, that the remaining people in our audience show respect, no comments or no arguments about any part of the presentation. This is to give everyone the opportunity to speak their piece to council, to let us know what their objections are, some what they're in favor of. But this is one way we will look at this afterwards. But tonight we will not be responding to any of the presentation at all. So at this point, I'm going to call on Paul Preston with his presentation.
Excuse me, Madam Mayor, may I speak just for 1 second? I see that I'm Karen Gagne and I'm here with the Steel Rail Committee, and it was just by accident that we were left off the agenda tonight. So if we could be please put at the end at least, as far as presentations go, we're all here. So we certainly appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. If that's possible.
Yeah.
Had you put in to
Yes,
come on
Albert
here
did,
tonight?
Yes.
2 months ago.
Yeah.
Was,
So.
can
but
I ask
it was
her?
just an honest mistake, but if we could just be put in at the last at least, that would be good.
We did have a request for them to be on the agenda, and then a few weeks ago, we received one to say that they did not want to be on the agenda. So we did not put them on the agenda. So they're here to say they want to be on the agenda. You can suspend the rules and allow it. So you could pass a resolution that would allow you to suspend the rules, put them on the agenda, or we can put them on July 9th.
Okay.
This is gonna be a long night as it's.
So I'm just trying to see where we could, Because they already asked to be on the agenda, right?
They did, yes.
Well, it's at your discretion.
Pardon?
It's at your discretion. And we apologize for any miscommunication. I was at the country and, but Elmer had handled it and
Okay. We're going to deal with the presentations with the short-term rental to start with. And then I'm not sure where we could fit you in here.
we won't be.
Unless it's items for council discussion, we'll fit you in there. Had you not made a request and whatever transpired, I'm not sure, but we'd have to say no. However, you have made the request to be on the agenda, so we'll put you in here on number 8 as B, okay?
Thank you very much.
Now, we'll go back to Paul Preston. Is he here? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. What you permit, you promote. Residential is defined as permanent or long-term. Our residential zones are for residential use by residents of Bonfield, living in neighborhoods of neighbors that know each other and help each other out. Short-term rentals are effectively motels, businesses that rent by the day but with no front desk supervision. This is in no way residential. The unregulated conversion of homes to motels progressively changes neighborhoods into commercial motel strips where neighbors are replaced by strangers with no connection to our community or care or concern for the neighborhood. As homes come up for sale, these businesses can easily outbid anyone wanting to purchase the property as a home to live in because of the profits they take in. I just learned we had yet another home this week in our neck of the woods on Shields Point Road, sold and converted into another of these motels. This progressively drives the housing prices upwards and upwards, while at the same time reducing the housing supply and reducing the number of residents who live here permanently. There are communities across Canada further down this slippery slope where this has reached a crisis in proportion, and we mustn't let our community get there. With profits and money on the line, as you may have noticed, some of the business owners will say anything, insult, slander, intimidate, threaten, and basically try to bully any of us that want to keep our neighborhoods as neighborhoods. I last experienced this a number of years ago as chair of the smoke-free bylaw committee, going to city council in North Bay a couple times, requesting smoke-free public spaces and restaurants. Back then, those that thought they benefited from the status quo claimed we had our smoke-free spaces, even though they were in the same space as the smokers, and my kids smelled like smoke when we came home from restaurants. Similarly now, folks that benefit from the way things are unregulated are claiming that running a motel without a front desk is the same as being your neighbor. It's gaslighting. As we all know, the smoke-free bylaws we did end up getting in North Bay 2 years before the province did not harm restaurants or take away people's rights to smoke, as they claimed. It did let us all breathe smoke-free air in public spaces and restaurants, which is the greater common good of all. I mention it as an example of why we need to live in a society with regulations and law and order, and yet how aggressively people will oppose such fair, equitable, and obvious regulation at the outset for their own personal gain. As other residents have pointed out in their submissions, short-term rentals are especially problematic in residential limited service zones, where neighbors must come together to maintain the road, where emergency vehicles are not obligated to attend, and even tow trucks refuse to come, which is why I had to spend a couple hours pulling a short-term renter out of the ditch a couple winters ago. We simply should not be permitting and promoting corporations and distant investors to buy up our community's homes in residential zones and convert them to motels. These are commercial usages, which would be suitable for commercial zones in our township. If we're going to permit short-term rentals, much of the harm is limited by allowing only a principal residence to be used for a limited time. This protects the housing supply and ensures that our neighbors are preserved that care about their neighbors, our neighborhoods, and their communities. In the proposed current bylaw, as proposed, if there are less than 50 residential principal residence short-term rental applications accepted, then distant investors and then corporations will be invited to set up these motels in our residential zones. As it was written, only principal residence owners would be required to stay in one of the bedrooms, which makes it more of a bed and breakfast than a short-term rental. And that requirement would be unfair to the principal residence owners, it should be the same for all types. Bed and breakfast should be dealt with separately from short-term rentals as they are in our current bylaws. Also, renters should be required to be informed of our existing bylaw requirements for dogs, which require a leash and stoop. As we've experienced dogs barking and growling at us on our own property and on our shared laneway and leaving huge piles of feces in our shared laneway. We need regulation of short-term rentals that will stop the progressive conversion of our neighborhoods into motel strips. So we can get on with enjoying living together as neighbors, caring for our neighborhoods, helping each other out like neighbors do. We thank each of you on council for your leadership and your willingness to govern us through this process for the greater common good of all, despite the noise and the bullying. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, the number 2, we're putting it to the end. Michelle is not here. Next, we have Lori Langlois.
Your worship and counselors, thank you for letting me present tonight. You say that you are for short-term rentals, but your actions do not show your support. You presented falsified data to the public. You manipulated survey results that were in favor of no regulations. You went to the very extreme lengths of looking up IP addresses to devalue survey results. You have no documentation proving short-term rentals are a problem in the township. You publicly stated that those in favor of not regulating short-term rentals are cohorts that skewed the data and do not represent the voice of the community. You have proposed regulations so strict that getting a license will be out of reach. Even in the face of all these challenges so far in this process, we remain respectful and willing to work with you. We are upstanding members of your community and want Bonfield to be a great place for everyone to thrive, including visitors. I believe what has been overlooked in this process is that the main stakeholders related to the success of this bylaw are the short-term rental hosts. Of course, disgruntled, not in my backyard people will be in favor of implementing the most severe restrictions, but they are not the ones we need the buy-in from. Short-term rental hosts' acceptance of regulation is the single most important factor affecting compliance of this bylaw. Let's look at the bylaw. The document itself is excessively long, confusing, and filled with legal jargon, making it overwhelming to the layperson. First off, a good bulk of this proposed bylaw has been plagiarized from the township of Killarney, attached in Appendix A. In fact, on the declaration of the applicant page, it still says it will be used by the municipality of Killarney. With a few wording changes and further restrictions added, it is easy to see that this was put out in haste, and no one has taken the time to develop a bylaw tailored to the township of Bonfield and its uniqueness. You say that you're unbiased and support short-term rentals, but are proposing placing one of the most restrictive bylaws that can be found. Restrictions that are so confining, they will make it nearly impossible to obtain a license for most. You might as well be offering us $1 million, but we have to hold our breath for 12 hours to get it. When comparing to other townships in our area, of the 9 townships reviewed, seven of them don't have bylaws. Chisholm, Temagami, Perry Sound does not, Berks Falls does not, Powassan, Mattawa, Callender. Of the 2 remaining townships that pass bylaws, East Ferris has already had to amend theirs since over-restriction created non-compliance. Even with the amendments, there are still only 2 short-term rental licenses in that township. This is proof that restrictive bylaws are ineffective in regulating and only drive short-term rentals underground. Section 2.2.3 requires the operator of a short-term rental to hold $5 million in liability insurance. Myself and others have called many insurance companies and spent hours on the phone only to find out $5 million of coverage is actually not possible. In fact, 2 of the insurance companies I talked to said that your township is asking for this because they don't want you to have a short-term rental. With other townships maxing out the liability insurance required at $2 million, why choose this outrageous and unobtainable figure? This is a significant barrier put in place by council will hinder short-term rental owners? What about the right to privacy and protection of our own personal information? Do you automatically give these rights up if you have a short-term rental? Ontario's Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act says, government institutions must design and implement record systems which adequately protect personal privacy and safeguard information which could endanger the health or safety of an individual. We use the security of short-term rental platforms to maintain a level of connection with our guests while preserving our safety and privacy. If our private information were published on a public website by the township, as well as on the door of our property, it would breach the Privacy Act and put rental hosts at risk. Why is this information essential in the regulation of short-term rentals when it's not a requirement for long-term rental owners? This is a tactic being used by the township as yet another barrier in this cumbersome bylaw. On the topic of inspections, if a dwelling passed all the codes that existed in the past, but is not up to the current codes, as I'm sure many homes and long-term rentals are not, what codes will be enforced? Will this be up to the discretion of the bylaw officer? How will you ensure that everyone is treated equally in this process? What will be done with this information if the host decides not to obtain a license? There is also the issue of what to do with the short-term rentals which were in operation prior to this proposed bylaw. Most other townships are allowing existing short-term rentals to have licenses on a legal non-conforming basis. I think this also presents a legal issue for the township of Bonfield, since there are people within this community that have documentation saying that short-term rentals are permitted. If the safety of the community members is truly the rationale here, then you should be holding all members of the community to the same high standard. What about long-term rentals? Long-term rentals have extensive regulations set out by the Tribunals of Ontario Landlord and Tenant Board. The Residential Tenancies Act sets out the obligation of landlords and tenants each have for maintenance and repair of the rental property. Nowhere in this act is there the requirement of a home, septic, electrical, fire inspection in order to begin renting out a property. Instead, the onus is placed on the landlord, who is responsible to maintain standards, where a landlord must keep a rental property in good state of repair. They must keep the rental property clean and must make sure the rental property meets health and safety, housing and maintenance standards, attached with Appendix B. Inspections are required when there's a complaint or an issue brought forth. Where is the data that shows there is increased safety risks and concerns for short-term rental guests over long-term rentals, as well as residents in their primary or seasonal dwelling? In fact, wouldn't long-term rental tenants and permanent residents be at higher risk since they inflict increased wear and tear on the residents from living there full time? If the huge conglomeration of the Landlord-Tenant Board is not imposing inspections on landlords, the same approach should be applied to short-term rentals. If not to present yet another barrier, then why are short-term rentals held to this level of stringent evaluation? The fees. The fees are outrageous. The $1,500 licensing fee is the highest of any in the province. It's just not feasible for anyone looking to rent their cottage out a few weeks in the summer to supplement their taxes and costs. Also, it states every person who contravenes any provision of this bylaw is guilty of an offense and on conviction is liable to a fine not exceeding $25,000, but could be up to $50,000 on the second offense. What does this mean? Any provision of the bylaw. So if my guests sing happy birthday to their grandmother, are you saying this could cost us $25,000? This is a significant roadblock and appears to be a scare tactic to deter short-term rentals. The bylaw appears to be riddled with discriminatory restrictions against short-term rental owners. None is more obvious than the short-term rental code of conduct section 60 restriction, which sets to ban singing. This is the most absurd thing we have heard. So tell me, how is this monitored and regulated? How is this measured? Whose discretion is this at? Who thought this was a good idea to put in here? I think a really great way for a small township of Bonfield to make national news is to put a document out there that restricts people from singing "O Canada" and the happy birthday song. There are currently existing bylaws about noise that apply to all members of the community. Why are these not being drawn upon? It has been established by the Superior Court of Ontario that bylaws that purport to regulate short-term rental use of a property cannot do so in a way that is discriminatory. This bylaw, as it is written, seeks to regulate people. There are ongoing lawsuits in Ontario related to municipalities placing restrictions and regulations on short-term rentals. One of which has an application with the Superior Court of Ontario challenging the licensing bylaw in Tiny Township. The grounds of this case are that the new licensing bylaw attempts to restrict, punish, and make it unreasonably difficult for short-term rentals to operate. They say legally, a licensing regime can only seek to regulate, not restrict, and hence it's illegal in its current form. So if townships proceed with bylaws that are found in the future to be illegal, when reviewed by the judicial system, they may be liable for compensating short-term rental owners for loss of revenue and earnings starting from induction of the bylaw. Has this huge risk for a township been reviewed by legal representation? Is this endeavor really worth the risk for our small township when you haven't actually proven there to be an issue? Perhaps this is another reason why you don't see a lot of smaller townships with bylaws, because they just can't afford the lawsuits they might bring. Your worship and councillors, first off, isn't it reasonable to wait at the very least until the major case at the Superior Court of Ontario level is decided, since it will set precedent and create case law? While you're waiting, you can collect the data, prove there is an actual issue with short-term rentals that warrants a bylaw in our township. Take the time to seek out legal advice to thoroughly evaluate this proposed bylaw so that you can be absolutely certain it doesn't pose a legal risk to the township and make taxpayer dollars vulnerable. I would also like to respectfully ask that you examine what is driving this bylaw as it is written forward. Keeping in mind that contrary to what you've been told, most short-term rental hosts are responsible people trying to supplement their income so that they too can have the opportunity to enjoy cottage life. Though this proposed bylaw may placate a few of the outspoken elite, it overlooks the people at the very center of its success, the short-term rental hosts. This concludes my presentation, Your Worship. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next we have Gina Langua.
There you go. You're free.
Good evening.
Your worship, council members, and members of the public. More people have been purchasing rural and recreational properties in the country to escape the city's constraints of the rules and regulations that govern behavior in urban society. Our community has been telling council that they feel they are being overregulated and overgoverned. It seems we have a small group of municipal staff and members of our council that is leaning our township towards an urban society and not knowing or forgetting the real heart of our community and why we have chosen to live here. For my first meeting on the official plan, the bias towards not allowing short-term rentals and other restrictions were very pronounced. I got the impression that some were wanting to urbanize our community. Short-term rentals have been used for well over 60 years. My own husband's family rented a cottage every year because they couldn't afford their own. My family was fortunate, owned a cottage on Trout Lake, and I know back then on our lane, at least 3 of the cottages allowed were short-term rentals. It's even being more difficult for a common blue-collar worker to be able to experience the life at a cottage or a recreational property. My background is in property and land management in the public sector. I've had to provide recommendations and provide the answers as to why not? Why can't we do something? Due to my background and experience and having to obtain legal advice in my previous workplace, I was often surprised by legal's recommendation. You need to understand and look at the possible outcome. It is not as simple as you think. You can be putting a burden of legal expenses onto the taxpayer by not looking at the big picture and being biased. You need to look at all sides before taking action. We've had a lot of short-term rentals in the past that have been going on for years within our own community. So how are we going to cope with that? How are we going to handle any legal repercussions from that? Who's going to pay for that? We know short-term rentals have been used for over 50 years. We know they are probably here to stay. We know we have limited business accommodations within our municipality. I know there have been short-term rentals within our community long before this being brought to council without any concern. There is the issue in this proposed bylaw for those wanting the option to do a short-term rental on the principal dwelling and notice as Class A in the bylaw. It discriminates those in that class. You may want to rent your principal dwelling short-term because you may need to supplement your income to assist in paying taxes, mortgages, etc. Or sometimes life happens that you don't see coming. Believe me, I know. There are so many variances that this scenario may happen, therefore should be the same as Class B. Further, upon checking my own home insurance, it allowed me up to 30 days per year on a short-term rental of my dwelling or a portion of it at $2 million liability. So even the insurance company thought that was sufficient. Also, your children or grandchildren, if they wish to hang onto the lands for the next generation, short-term rental may be an only option for them for a few weeks to supplement expenses. We all know it's pretty hard to change a bylaw that is already in place. Also, it is difficult to replace a rural, recreational, or waterfront property once it's gone. There is glamping, tenting permitted in other areas. This is a concept welcomed by many, and for us not to permit in our township would not be beneficial to this community. The bylaw document itself is excessive. It creates a barrier to owners and overregulates. It is proven what is happening in East Ferris Township by overregulating. Out of all of that happened in East Ferris, 2 licenses have been given. And I'm sure there's more than 2 places being short-term rentals. Taxpayers' money is being used in legal actions across the province. There is no actual data of the number of complaints or if in fact there are formal complaints with OPP or actual confirmed bylaw infractions, even for last summer. The median for most short-term rentals has been identified in one of the townships as less than 12 weeks occupancy rate for the year. So how does this warrant such excessive inspections on short-term rentals? So why is this even justified? The inspection requirements puts a strain on our municipal staff, volunteer firemen for processing, and the inspection application process, and also to the taxpayers on where our tax dollars are being spent. This also puts strains and financial stress and financial strain on the owner of a short-term rental. The prime reason for renting is to subsidize costs to be even able to afford the property or provide a service to the community for accommodations that are lacking. Then adding the $1,500 fee and costs only adds. The fact is that most of the short-term rentals are in recreational zone, so they already have one of the highest tax rates levied in the township. We need the time and resources by municipal staff and by council on issues that affects the majority of the taxpayers. I know some of the comments is like pulling a family of 4 out of the ditch. We have pulled out people out of the ditch on a municipal road more than once. Just a couple of weeks ago, somebody living down on Shields Point on the unmaintained portion was in the ditch right on Shields Point Road. So it can happen anywhere. I live in an RLS zone for over 40 years and never has an emergency service vehicle not made in our road, summer, spring, fall, or winter. I'm not sure where data was received to make such a general statement for all
RLS roads. We currently have 3 propane large trucks going in and out all winter long at different times. In fact, I had a friend coming in one day and to see if getting in and out our road was a problem. But there was no, the problem wasn't in our road. There wasn't an issue, but my husband came back and said, no way they're going to get up the hill on the municipal road due to the icy conditions, to the rain that night. And there are going to be those challenging times until we all get out there to clean the roads. It happens even on our highways. It's not just, it's all over. So we have to wait till the weather clears or also just it would be hard to claim short-term renters are hard on our roads. What about if the landowner was there full time? What about the delivery trucks or the nonstop traffic of building material and equipment arriving for months for a renovation or new build or our visitors? Next, are there going to be restrictions on the road for how many vehicles that each owner is allowed to go over the road? Like how many bags you're allowed at the dump, and then you have to pay your overage for the use of the road? I don't think that's going to happen on our road association. The road association insurance has been used by many road associations for years. It's a personal choice. My own brother-in-law, because he was maintaining a road down in the Halliburton area, decided that he wanted it, and there was no, it's just the way he was. In our township, there's no data that a 3-day rental is a party place. You're cutting out the enjoyment of the less fortunate that cannot afford a longer stay. My spouse worked out of town, so I was often left alone throughout the week. I have had short-term rentals in my area well before COVID. I am the opposite as noted by someone else. I enjoy seeing the lights on in the distance. I am more uncomfortable when the area is in darkness and more concerned about the possibility of perpetrators canvassing my neighborhood late at night looking for people not at home. Rather, I'm less concerned of a neighbor short-term renter. Cancel Corbett's comment in media article stated I don't necessarily understand why there is perception that we are trying to shut down short-term rentals. I do not see it this way, as do many. Just this bylaw document alone shows you are not encouraging short-term rentals because it's almost impossible. When you overregulate, make unnecessary restrictions, and do not have faith in your own constituents, you are not going to get a buy-in. Seems maybe the case in many townships. Bulldozing your way does not get public buy-in. Has the council members gone thoroughly through this document and understand it? I don't in some places. Have they taken into consideration how this can be implemented for this season and all the resources, time, staff, wages, etc. to implement and enforce? As there are still so many unknowns in the regulating and outcome of legal cases with short-term rentals throughout the province, it may be in the best interest of the township to not pursue with a bylaw at this time as others have. A suggestion would be have short-term rentals acceptable in the official plan, and that as demand or need arises, the township may, by bylaw, implement policies or programs to monitor. To try to implement a very complex, restrictive bylaw at this time is setting up for failure, not being fiscal responsible to the taxpayer, and not obtaining a buy-in. Our township is only approximately 2,000 people, with less than 35 rentals, according to the township. A quick check without verification, so could very well be less. That short-term rentals actually have a low yearly vacancy rate due to choices, owners not renting at a certain part of the year, snowmobile trails opened or not opened, times required for owners' own use, etc. I've been monitoring the short-term rental, and since January the 1st, it's 15 days that it's been rented. It is so quiet around my place. I have no trouble sitting on our dock, having morning coffee, enjoying quietness, but I also enjoy the sound of children, the people boating, everything that our own children all enjoy. The short-term rental, give your constituents credit. Believe that these owners are honest and respectable people, and they expect the same from the renters. I believe that their neighbors are kind, considerate, and the majority are accepting. A renter is gone in a couple of days or a week, so if you don't like an active short-term rental, enjoying the surroundings and not doing any sort of infraction, at least their time is short. Unlike the very, very small percentage of a permanent owner that you may have that may complain, lack tolerance, and too busy worrying about what you are doing, no matter who resides beside them for 365 days of the year. I once had that neighbor, even to the degree of my mom being told not to pick the raspberry bushes adjacent on the other side of their property. They complained about everything. It can be stressful and not healthy for anyone. We still treated him with kindness. Even though you were helping him with his sunken boat, he was still saying he was sabotaged. Give everyone a chance to make it work, even that neighbor. After all, short-term renting has worked for well over 50 years in communities of people renting out their properties for a short duration without being overregulated. I believe our community has great values and respect of others, as we did yesterday and as we did over 50 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenna. Next, we have Valerie Creech.
Good evening. I'm voicing my concern about the township arbitrarily granting permission for a previously privately owned cottage 2 doors down from me to now be a commercial short-term rental property. I'm a widow who lives alone year-round down Booty Road on Grey Rock Lane on Talon Lake. I know all my neighbors well and have always felt confident that I'm safe here. I've been there 40 years. Inevitably, with the decision by the township to grant permission for a succession of strangers to rent on a short-term revolving basis along our road and waterfront, I feel that security may now be at risk. As well, our area is zoned residential limited services, and we're taxed according to that designation. We access our homes by the private lane referred to as Booty Road and then Grey Rock Lane. As a group, we 12 property owners along the road maintain our road ourselves, winter and summer. This includes hiring someone to plow in winter and working as a neighborhood group to do maintenance, such as filling potholes in the summer. Booty Road, Grey Rock Lane itself is a narrow, one-lane path in many sections. It's truly a lane, not a road, with no room for cars to pass each other in opposite directions in many spots. We've all made ourselves familiar with places along the road where we can pull over to allow another car to pass by. Strangers and the increased traffic using the road could create a danger for us all. We get no services from the municipality, no garbage pickup, no road maintenance, no door-to-door mail delivery, no police presence to monitor traffic or trespassers, and yet we pay very high property taxes. For the township to arbitrarily decide to allow short-term rental there, I feel it's a travesty. It's clear that this decision was motivated by the increased revenue for the township brought about by the fees for short-term rental allowance. But if the township is to reap the benefit of this increased revenue, this, at the very least, necessitates increased obligations by the township to the rest of us taxpayers in our area. This must include assuming maintenance of the road, at least partially, along with the obvious necessity of widening the road due to increased and often unfamiliar traffic. And we'll have an increased necessity for ease of access for emergency services, such as fire and ambulance to get to us, and to the new short-term renters who might easily be unfamiliar with fire restrictions and water safety. Obviously, as well, there must be an accompanying reduction in our property taxes, because due to this Can I start over that sentence? Obviously, as well, there must be an accompanying reduction in our property taxes due to a decided decrease in our property values brought about by permitting a commercial establishment to set up business along our road. I trust you will address my concerns quickly. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Donna. Next, we have Patty Russell.
Good evening. I first want to take a moment to thank Madam Mayor and Council for allowing me to speak tonight on behalf of the short-term bylaw changes. For anyone that may not know who I am, my name is Patricia and I'm one of the owners of the Rustic Escape, located right here in the town of Bonfield. Almost 5 years ago, my husband, my now 6-year-old son, and myself moved to the small rural town of Bonfield after my husband accepted a job in the area. I myself come from a small town of St. Thomas, and my husband comes from an even smaller town than Bonfield called Fenwick. So we have grown up watching all the support from small towns that have given back to their community. The best way to define a community is by the shared attributes of people in or by the strengths of the connections among them. As a short-term rental owner, small business owner, and a community member, I have taken upon myself to connect with as many neighbors as possible. We have in the last almost 4 years hosted open houses, farm tours, and recently a free community pig roast. These open community events we have shared with so many neighbors have been a civil way of bringing the town together without the greed of money. What better way to truly get to know your community by having a free event or a small cost event where the money goes back into the whole community and not just certain businesses or the town pocket. Back in March, we hosted an open farm tour for everyone to come out and see about the hidden gem Bonfield has to offer. I am proud to say that we had roughly 400 people come out that day with a small charge to the people and families. This event not only fulfilled people's dreams, but many new friendships were formed, other local businesses were recognized, and the money raised went into the sponsorship of the Rocking Horse Racing Association. Not only was it successful for the Rustic Escape, but it also brought in more business for the Bonfield Market, Raleigh's Pit Stop, and the Quickway convenience store. If one short-term rental is able to bring in that much more support, just imagine what the other 30 plus rentals are bringing into the town. I understand and fully support regulations of short-term rentals. I know this will ensure the safety of users and set baseline standards for owners, accountability for owners, as well as the Township of Bonfield Council. What it also is doing is pushing small businesses and short-term rentals to shut down, and we happen to be one of them. Under the bylaw section of health and safety, Council is asking 5 million liability insurance coverage. I have respectfully done my due diligence and contacted several insurance companies from all over, and the absolute most I have been able to get is 2 million liability. I also took it upon myself to speak to other short-term rental owners in the area to see if this was a practical request. And unfortunately, no company will provide them with 5 million. I even went above that and contacted some larger companies, and the most coverage certain companies were able to get was 3 million. And again, that was coming from a large company. I ask you to consider this bylaw change and request an amount that is practical, keeping in mind we are short-term rental owners, not corporations. The $1,500 license fee exorbitant. I do not feel that this is supporting in a fair competition. Under the frequently asked question short-term rentals, how did we arrive at the fee amounts? Sturgeon, Ontario instituted a similar bylaw, which each license initially costing $750 with an annual renewal of $250. Establishing a large license fee appears to be targeting small rental property owners, thus giving the impression that Bonfield is attempting to make rental properties their tax base, and that is not merely a matter of covering its administrative costs. Though the government deserves its fair share of profits, high fees may deter small businesses from either establishing or merely surviving in the township of Bonfield, impacting profits from tourism and associated service fees accrued from these actual businesses. Watching back on a previous council meeting, one specifically back in February when the topic of character of Bonfield came up, I was quite insulted by the slander of one community member in particularly, stating that short-term rentals are damaging the characteristics of Bonfield. Again, keeping in mind, I wasn't born and raised here, I will honestly say there was more negative things said about Bonfield opposed to the positive characteristics. As a couple of members of council know, because I have been told specifically by them, why can't there be more people like me? I go directly to the source instead of believing all the he said, she said gossip. In this case, I took the benefit of the doubt and moved my little family up here, believing that the small town of Bonfield would be supportive and everyone in their community, the same way my small hometown was. In March of 2022, Bonfield was nominated as one of the top 10 enchanting places to stay. In August of 2022, Bonfield was selected as one of the top 9 unique places to stay during March break. In December of 2023, Bonfield was selected amongst the top 10 wedding Airbnbs in Ontario. Also in December of 2023, Trip 101, which is an online site that publishes all the hidden gems across the world, contacted us personally to do an interview to put Bonfield on the map amongst all the other beautiful places to visit. I would have to disagree that by having the short-term rentals, does not damage character on Bonfield, but rather makes Bonfield shine and be known for the great things they have to offer. Why do I say Bonfield was nominated opposed to the Rustic Escape? Because we need to all be recognized as a community rather than a short-term rental individual. Under the bylaw section of maintain character of neighborhood, a corporation will be permitted to apply thirdly after the 14-day window has closed for non-hosted short-term rentals, and a corporation can only have one short-term rental in the township. I ask you to reconsider this bylaw based on the size of the owner's property. Respectfully so, I understand that being in a residential neighborhood with a small amount of property, having several short-term rentals can be disturbing to the neighborhood. But how about the rural properties with the several acreages? As an example, being our property, which is situated on 82.7 acres, and our rentals being located beyond the visibility of our backyard when you enter our property. I quote from a good neighbor of ours that I had no idea you were even running for an entire year. And if you aren't aware, we operate 3 rentals to which the town had given us permission to go ahead with prior to investing our money into them. If applying for the proper permits and earn insurance, I ask that you consider this bylaw change and base it upon the location in a rural area and the size of the property. Under the bylaw, health and safety must be an occupiable dwelling. This kind of goes hand in hand with what with my previous statement, that if we apply for the proper permit and have the insurance, that other structures other than our main home be used as a short-term rental. This will also be beneficial to the potential bylaw of responsible person, having a response time of 45 minutes. Most likely, when other structures on the property are being rented out, it means the owners normally live on site, like, for example, us. We currently operate 3 rentals, a log cabin, a glamping tent, and a stargazing dome, all of which are off-grid, providing an experience for people to disconnect from the daily busy city life. As the world continues to rise in cost of living, more and more people are looking to escape the day-to-day city life and reconnect with nature, their spouse, themselves, or whatever the reason may be. Often short-term rentals are viewed as a place to party, and I can confidently say that this in no way is the case. In my experience for running for 4 years, I know for a fact that no member of council has taken the time out to come out to our place and see for themselves what we have to offer other than the mayor. At our free community pig roast, Mayor Nari took the time out of her busy schedule to personally see what the Rustic Escape was all about. And in that short visit, she was truly amazed by our property. Council, Madam Mayor, and all the community members of Bonfield, if there is one thing I can ask of you today is to take the time before making your decision and personally see these short-term rentals in this town and meet the owners that have worked so hard to provide a comfortable stay for others to enjoy while visiting Bonfield. I can personally tell you that I have had the opportunity to speak with the short-term rental homeowners, and they are in every way just like you and I. They are trying to support their families. They have purchased these homes for the future of their children because they are proud of this town. And it's a source of income for those who are struggling with these increased costs in our economy. As a mother who has a husband who works away from home for half of the year, no choice of his own, as there are no local jobs in his field, with no local family support, setting these new bylaws in place will give me no choice but to close down. The Rustic Escape has been a sponsor to the Cornhole League, Rocking Horse Association, donated to the ATV Rise for the Lions Club, donated to every parade and Easter hunt, donated hats to every child and staff at Lorraine Catholic Elementary School, and have closely worked with some of the small businesses in Bonfield. So on behalf of myself and my family, thank you for allowing me to speak. And I hope you reconsider these bylaws, because with the future of Bonfield, converting your outdoor arena into a wedding venue, having the short-term rentals will be very beneficial to our town. Thank you.
Thank you. The next one is Natalie Burkhan. Here. She here?
I don't think she's here. I think over here. I think that the next one, A13 is on Zoom.
Pardon?
I think the remaining ones will just be for me to read, but A13 is on Zoom.
It's on Zoom, okay. And what about the other ones?
He's gonna read them.
Hmm?
She's gonna read them.
After,
They didn't identify that they wanted to present,
Okay.
so I'll read.
okay. Good
Hi.
evening. Hi.
Madam Mayor and council people, my name's Robin Edwards and I'm here with Amy Cullimore. We are the besieged owners of the single dwelling on Grey Rock Lane that happens to rent our property. By way of background, we purchased our private dwelling 3 years ago. Arguably the worst time in history to purchase a property, but after 10 years of searching, we decided to make Bonfield and our cottage our future for our 7 children and ourselves in our older years. Because of purchasing at the worst time in history, we had to decide to rent our cottage. Prior to deciding to own our cottage, we were the dreaded renters for approximately 30 years, moving from cottage to cottage and looking for what made us happy. And when we found our cottage, it was this cottage on Grey Rock Lane that made us happy enough to purchase. We are also law-abiding citizens who happen to rent our cottage. We are not a motel. We're not a commercial property. We rent our cottage for approximately 5 to 6 weeks a year in order to pay our mortgage and to pay our taxes. We have had no complaints against our renters, although I will say we did rent to a young family, friends of ours, who did ditch their car with their twins in the car, and we were very grateful to our neighbors for helping them. But that, it seems, has been our greatest crime to date. We are not going to review our policy submissions to you because the presenters before us have done such an excellent job in reviewing the specific amendments. But what we would like to say is that we're simply people trying to make a go of things. We're people perhaps a little less fortunate than others who have inherited a cottage, who have had the opportunity and income to purchase a cottage. And yes, we're renting. And as a result, we've been pulled into this short-term rental debate in a community that we're new to. And at no time do we have any pretense of speaking for the community. We can really only speak from our experience. What we had hoped when this process started was that it would be a process built on fairness, and particularly procedural fairness, that it was a process that was transparent and was built on principles of integrity and inclusivity, and that the outcome of this short-term rental policy review really reflected the voice of the breadth and the depth of the community, and not just of a few privileged people. It's difficult for us to see how that's happening when here we are looking at all of these provisions that seem to fly in the face of the surveys done to really look at what the community has to say about short-term rentals. In the first survey that was conducted, the communication satisfaction survey, 64.5% of people wanted to permit short-term rentals. 56.69% did not want to regulate short-term rentals with a license, and yet here we are. 63.19% people disagreed that they should only be permitted on municipal roads, and 64.86% disagreed that the number of nights should be limited at all. In the second survey conducted at the town hall, a whopping 84.67% of people said that short-term rentals should be permitted and that they should be permitted on private roads without municipal accommodation tax and 65% said without a license required. We're not pretending to know the community nor to speak for the community, but we are here to advocate for a fair, transparent, inclusive process that really reflects not just the voices of some, but of all. It's a privilege for us to have moved to Bonfield in our cottage. It's a privilege to own a cottage at all, much less here in this beautiful community. If the policy is adopted as it stands, and if our neighbors through their conduct that we would describe as intimidation at least, are successful and we have to sell our cottage because we could no longer afford it, at least for us, we can do that. We can sell and we can leave. But we would implore council to consider the vast numbers of people that rely on the income they're making in short-term rentals to care for their families, the amount of income that they're bringing into the community, the amount of money that they're spending in this community and investing in this community. We would have the option to leave and we would be heartbroken and devastated to leave. But at least for us, that's an option, and it's not our livelihood. It's not a foundational source for us. We're trying to afford to stay for the future of our children. Owning a cottage is extremely expensive, as everybody knows, and it's our hope that this cottage would offer our children a shared place for their future down the road. And yes, in the process, we are renting our cottage in order to afford that dream, and we believe that that's a legitimate step for us to take. So we're really not going to add more to this commentator. The people before us have really done an amazing job of dissecting the policy, but we really just want you to consider looking more broadly than the interest of a few at the interest of all and how it's going to impact on the entire community. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Robin. Okay. Next, and you're going to read the next one?
Yeah.
Okay. So now the next one is on behalf of Natalie Burton.
Okay, I'm gonna stand up so I don't have my back to everybody.
Sure.
So hopefully, I can just get my back to you and hopefully you can hear me better. So 7A7. So comments on short-term rentals in the draft. I have read the draft legislation for the short-term rental bylaw as a resident of Bonfield and also a past resident of Muskoka, where short-term rental issue became somewhat of a crisis. I have comments for council's consideration. I am in favor of a license and fee for those homeowners who wish to offer their property for short-term rental. The fee should not be prohibitive, but should at least be reasonable amount to alleviate taxpayer burden on calls to police, fire, and ambulance. I am in favor of the 5 million insurance provision, and I would consider that owner obtained proof of added insurance coverage for septic building on the homeowner policy be accepted in lieu of township inspection. Option of inspection or time limit for providing proof of added insurance for septic and building be provided in cases where proof of insurance is not shown at the time of the license application. With respect to policing, the township of Bonfield will eventually need to hire a weekend bylaw officer to address some of the issues that would otherwise cost taxpayers when police are called. I encourage council to consider this ahead of time or at least make future provisions for such a position as it will become needed with increase in population and short-term rentals. That said, with respect to the section outlining Building Code Ontario Regulation 332-12 under the Building Code Act, I am also concerned with the status and properties within Bonnfield in general. A drive through a small town is enough to note significant issues with standards of maintenance in some of the properties. It would be a step toward building trust and establishing a broader sense of fairness among all residents across the board if these properties were cleaned up and rendered back to a state of proper maintenance. Finally, I do believe that some exceptions can be made to the proposed legislation. For example, a rustic escape has proven to be responsible business. Although it does not meet certain criteria under the new short-term rental provisions, they have a unique proposition that is well maintained and managed. Perhaps a third type of license could be established, or perhaps they could be grandfathered since they have been operating legally and transparently without issue.
Thank you. The next is Tom and Sharon Benner.
Okay, so hello, the following comments are respectfully submitted in relation to the draft short-term rental bylaw. The numerous requirements specified in the bylaw are appropriate and strike the right balance between the interests of all parties. Consideration should also be given to requiring a minimum rental of 1 week, which would surely reduce the likelihood of renters looking for a weekend party place. Given financial benefits to the township, road access rentals should be restricted to township maintained roads. It is not at all appropriate to allow rentals under this bylaw on private roads maintained by private associations at their expense. If they are indeed allowed, then the township should have to share some proceeds from the proposed regime with the affected associations for maintenance and insurance. However, the wiser approach is to recognize that commercial Airbnb type activity is not compatible with private roads. The bylaw requires an on-site response to complaints within 45 minutes, but the frequently asked question on the website refers to an on-site response within 45 minutes or a phone response within 30 minutes. I trust the latter is a mistake, as the bylaw does not state that a 30-minute phone response is an acceptable alternative to an on-site response, which should indeed be required. Finally, the successful operation of the regime established by this bylaw will require a commitment to adequately resource it so that inspections and bylaw responses and enforcement, for example, are timely and fulsome. Thank you for the opportunity to comment. The efforts of council and staff are appreciated.
Thank you. Next, we have Gordon Benner.
Okay, so I would like to offer the following comments on the short-term rental bylaw currently under consideration by council. Although I do not desire to address council with this issue, he wants to be available by Zoom, so hopefully he's on the YouTube. So section 2.2.7 E and F of the proposed bylaw deals with the issue of short-term rental businesses established on water access properties or on roads other than public roads. Dealing with the problem of emergency access in these cases by way of requiring the posting of signage at the business location seems an inadequate means of dealing with a potentially serious problem. For any short-term tenant worried about emergency response, cardiac patients or people with mobility issues, etc. Learning about limitations in emergency response only after arrival would require that they accept more risk than they anticipated, or that they locate different accommodation on very short notice. I appreciate that if there are existing uses in these locations, it might be necessary to grandfather them as legal non-conforming uses, but surely it would be inadvisable to create any more such problems. It would be an easy fix to simply amend the bylaw to prohibit short-term rental businesses except on properties serviced by public roads. If applications are received to permit new businesses on non-public roads, these applications could simply be held in abeyance until such time as the township has assumed responsibility for the road access. On a second issue, I note that the proposed bylaw is silent on the issue of operating commercial businesses adjacent to or in immediate vicinity of lands maintained for conservation purposes. It strikes me as likely that some uses of short-term rental accommodation may be incompatible with conservation of natural habitats. Council may wish to consider prohibiting short-term rental accommodation businesses within a set distance of any land under the care of the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority.
Thank you. Next, we have Julia and Paul Ribard.
Okay, so we access our property via private road. This road is maintained at our expense, and recently we have purchased liability insurance to protect our road executive from potential claims due to increased use of the road. Allowing short-term rentals of properties accessed by private roads will result in increased traffic and increased potential for liability claims. We don't expect the township will wish to assume the additional costs caused by the additional traffic. Therefore, we submit the proposed bylaw exclude from its application properties accessed by private roads only. Thank you for your consideration.
Next, we have Dana Benner.
I'm going to take a drink. Okay, so I've had the opportunity to review the proposed bylaw with respect to short-term rentals. For the most part, I found that the bylaw made a good attempt to balance the interest of those seeking to rent out their properties and the interest of private individuals to enjoy their properties without disruption. The provisions of the bylaw, which address noise disruption, the number of occupants, and the need for proper septic systems in particular, are reassuring. I do, however, have some serious concerns about a couple of issues. The bylaw permits commercial rentals, which can only be accessed through privately maintained roads. At the present time, the full responsibility for maintaining private access roads falls to the incorporated private non-profit associations formed by residents who work cooperatively to maintain the road access. Significantly, those associations bear the entire cost of doing so with little to no assistance from the township. Having served for many years on the executive of Shields Point Road Association, I am very much aware of the countless hours volunteers work to organize road associations, collect dues, arrange for contractors to perform maintenance, and provide volunteer labor to ensure the roads remain in good repair. The volunteer efforts are absolutely essential to providing access to properties at a reasonable cost. By allowing commercial rentals in properties that are dependent upon private roads, you will make the task of the associations considerably more difficult, and in particular will make it more expensive for the associations to operate. To illustrate, Shields Point Road Association in the past year voted to obtain liability insurance for the private road. If the road, which had heretofore only been used by residents, members, and their guests, was now going to be used by non-resident renters with no connection to the lake or the association, then insurance was viewed as a necessity. The need to purchase insurance was one of the factors that led to a significant increase, over 100% more than in previous years, in the dues assessed this year against every member. While the township is being compensated by way of license fees for the rental operations, the individual private road associations do not receive any compensation for the increased cost of providing access to the rental premises, and these costs are significant. In my view, the bylaw should either prohibit rentals accessed by private road, or the revenue from the licensing of the rentals should be shared with the various road associations to offset their increasing costs. 2. In addition to the increased costs to private road associations, there are broader concerns of liability. It is clear that the township sought to insulate themselves from the liability resulting from a failure to provide emergency services in a timely fashion by requiring the owners to post a disclaimer in the cottage where the rental lies on a private road. It is highly doubtful that such a disclaimer, which would only come to renters' attention after arrival after they have entered into the rental contract, I would legally insulate the township, but more significantly, it does absolutely nothing to protect the interest of the private road association. Delays in delivering emergency care could just as easily be blamed on the association as the township, and it is simply unfair to expect private associations to shoulder this liability without being indemnified by the township, which receives the licensing fee. For example, as the township is aware, McLaren Drive is not even built on the road allowance specified by the township, a deviation which the township has always tolerated and crosses through private property. As a result, McLaren Drive has been blocked off by one of the residents. I have personally witnessed the fire department erroneously attempt to access properties on Booty Road via McLaren Drive and being blocked where the road crosses onto private property. The fire truck was required to turn around on a narrow cottage road and retrace its route back quite some distance to Shields Point Road to gain access through another route, which significantly delayed their response time. Unless the township is prepared to address these types of historical anomalies with the private access roads and provide indemnity to the private associations, then the requirement for posting a vague disclaimer in the rental property provides little to no comfort to the private associations. Commercial rentals are simply incompatible with private road access. Number 3, while the bylaws do provide a framework for the operation of the rentals with respect to such issues as noise disruption, the number of tenants, subject concerns, and other issues, I am concerned about the ability to enforce the regulations. The only available mechanism for enforcement seems to be complaint to the bylaw officers. As many of these violations are likely to occur either late in the day or on weekends when the bylaw officers are unlikely to be available, I am concerned that the township is being completely unrealistic about their ability to enforce the bylaws. There does not seem to be a mechanism for reporting violations, particularly after hours, so that the concerns can be addressed in a timely fashion. Unless the township is prepared to underwrite the cost of effective enforcement by providing staff to respond to complaints in a timely fashion, then the regulatory framework is somewhat useless. At the very least, requiring that rentals must be for a minimum of 1 week would allow the issues to be addressed by the bylaw officers during their regular working hours. Short-term rentals over the course of a weekend will have been completed before the issues can be addressed by the bylaw officer without a significant expenditure by the township to provide proper enforcement around the clock 7 days a week and on holidays. If the township is prepared to allow weekend rentals, then enforcement must be provided by the township during those periods. Finally, I have concerns about the onus of proof. The simplest way for an owner who wishes to rent out their property without complying with the bylaws is to rent their property, accept a cash payment that leaves no paper trail, and then claim the renters are in fact guests of the owner, and therefore the rules of operating a rental don't apply. There should be a provision in the bylaw that once the owners obtain the license to operate a commercial rental, that occupants of the premises, when the owner is not present, will be presumed to be commercial renters, and the onus is on the owner to demonstrate otherwise. Otherwise, the township will face a very difficult, inevitably burden of proof that violations with respect to the noise regulations, the number of persons using the property, and other behavior contrary to the bylaws was due to misconduct by regulated renters as opposed to unregulated guests of the owners. I appreciate that the proposed bylaw strives to recognize and protect the legitimate concerns of residents enjoying their own properties. I remain concerned, however, that commercial premises should not be operating where the only access is across private roads due to concerns about both increased costs and liability. Similarly, I am concerned that while the bylaw provides for a system of penalties and fines to enforce the bylaw, that the mechanics of how to implement enforcement are not addressed and realistically will require a real commitment on the part of the township, both financially and otherwise, to ensure compliance. I thank you for the consideration of these concerns.
Thank you. Next, we have Sue and Jules Tessier.
To whom it may concern, we wanted to raise our voices on the new short-term rental bylaw. We are glad that the municipality is taking this on, as we know it is a problem in all municipalities across Canada. We can't ignore these rentals on the internet as they are happening all over. We do have a couple of concerns. Our properties are accessed by a private road, and we are considered residential with limited services. Those of us who live here pay for the maintenance and upkeep of our private road. We understand that there are many circumstances, especially in the winter, that an ambulance or fire truck could not reach our properties. If you give a license of operation for a short-term rental property on a road that the township does not maintain, the township would be held liable if emergency occurs. Number 2, I would also like to see in the bylaw that the initial granting of a license will be mandatory physical inspection of the property. Many of the buildings on the lake were built as cottages at a time when physical inspections were limited and permits were not always applied for. My concern is mostly around septic system and gray water getting into the lake. I hope that our concerns can be addressed in your bylaw.
Thank you. Next, we have David and Susan Montemuro.
Dear council members, we are writing this letter to provide comments on the recent publication of the draft short-term rental licensing bylaw, and would like these comments considered by council in your upcoming meeting regarding short-term rentals. While we do agree that there should be rules and regulations in place for this activity, we'd like to bring to your attention 2 areas in the draft that we feel should be strengthened and clarified. 1, allow short-term rentals only in areas serviced by public roads and restrict them from operating in residential limited services areas. The issuing of licenses in certain areas may not be consistent with the development principles of the township and could potentially have a negative impact on the surrounding neighborhood and developmentally sensitive areas. The area that we are concerned about is the designated lands in the township that are not serviced by public access roads. These limited areas are specifically designated as residential limited services. Some of the township's guiding principles and objectives of the official plan outlined on your website have been developed to protect natural and cultural heritage resources in areas, surface water and groundwater features, and protect and preserve sensitive areas and important natural resources, as well as fish and wildlife areas and wetlands. The operation of the short-term rental business in the RLS environmental is not consistent with the principles as set out in the official plan. The extra strain that increased traffic will have on private roads has a significant impact on the safety and security of the community. It may also affect environmentally sensitive areas. On the private roads, the road maintenance is the responsibility of the local landowners for repair and maintenance, and this is done at their expense. In most cases, these private roads are a single lane only, and because they are not maintained by the township, local landowners maintain the private roads and keep them operational for their own use. Short-term rental persons do not contribute to the physical work required to maintain the access. Added traffic from the rentals result in more work for the neighbors and community to maintain the road. There is also the issue of access for services. Short-term rentals that require access through private roads are not supported by sufficient local services required in the event of an emergency. Firstly, the private road is not always immediately passable during significant weather events such as high winds, rain and washouts, or snow and sleet that is common in our climate. If emergency services like fire and EMS are called, they may not be able to get to the location in a timely manner. There is also a concern that short-term rentals in these RLS areas will host people who are not as familiar with the fire safety regulations as are the cottagers in the community. With limited services in these areas provided by the township, we are urging you to restrict issuing licenses in the RLS designated areas. To increase the fines associated with contravention. The fines outlined for the contravention of the bylaws are well articulated. However, the amounts seem low for the impact that may be caused by the contravention. They do not seem high enough to be a real deterrent, and we would suggest that you increase them significantly across the board to have the desired outcome of adherence to the bylaw. In summary, we are pleased to see progress with the rules and regulations around short-term rentals. Some edits, such as restricting operation of short-term rentals to only areas that are serviced by public roads and not allowing them to operate in the RLS areas, and by increasing the fines associated with contraventions, will significantly help to avoid potential landowner conflicts. These edits would also be consistent with the principles outlined in the official plan. Thank you for considering the items we have mentioned in the letter, and feel free to contact us.
Thank you. We'll go back to A2.
Yes.
Sorry.
I had it in order at least. Please this is just to be considered, I think. As a resident of Bonfield Township, it concerns me that there is a movement regarding short-term rentals within all zones of Bonfield Township. My concern specifically is the properties that are zoned RLS, residential limited services. The properties within this zone cannot guarantee emergency services. Fire, ambulance, police, search and rescue, towing are all services that are not guaranteed in the RLS area. This situation should be considered a critical shortcoming for qualifying to run a rental establishment. The prospective tenants will be families with elderly individuals, small children, health issues, etc. The tenants will be staying in an area with dangerous wildlife, forested with poorly marked trails and large bodies of water, all of which can quickly lead to an emergency situation. Even in the event that the renters are made aware of the lack of services, this still puts the burden on protecting these individuals from themselves on the residents living in that area. A true example being a family with 2 young children in the middle of winter slid off the road and were stuck in a ditch. Towing companies refused to pull them out. Residents of the street spent multiple hours extracting their car. This could have been tragic if the incident had not occurred in a populated area. This was not the only rescue required from tenants of this rental unit. It would be reckless for the township to allow new or even existing short-term Airbnb or bed and breakfast to reside within residential areas that are designated RLS. Thank you for your consideration and time.
Thank you. That concludes the discussion in the presentation of the short-term rental bylaw and the comments received. In part B in this presentation and delegations, and I think we'll continue to the end of the presentations on at this time. So we'll go to part B, which is the discussion of RV trailers bylaw and comments received. And first of all, we would call on Paul Goodrich for his presentation.
Well, thank you very much, Your Worship, and members of council, and ladies and gentlemen, for permitting me the opportunity to speak. I'm here this evening on behalf of my client, Mr. Pat Kelly. It may surprise members of council to know that Mr. Kelly is actually quite supportive of the bylaw generally, but we do feel that there's a few items that could be improved. The first is there is no and as has come up in the past with the short-term rentals, there is no provisions for grandfathering of existing uses or existing locations of trailers that have existed in those locations. Now, these are typically protected under the Section 34 of the Planning Act as legal non-conforming uses. And I realize that your bylaws under the auspices of the Municipal Act, but it does set up a conflict between the two acts. A simple amendment to the bylaw to permit some form of grandfathering may head off a challenge in that on that basis. The other area where I see that a grandfathering clause would be advantageous would be Section 3.9, where it states that no person shall store, use, or maintain more than one trailer on a parcel of land, other than with a special operation or a special occasion license. However, some sites may already have 2 or 3 trailers on them. Once again, these are legal non-conforming uses, protected under the Planning Act at least. So if there was some form of grandfathering for up to a certain number of trailers on a particular site, once again, would avoid that challenge. Section 3.15 also dictates that, through regulation, that the trailers must be 30 meters back from the water's edge. This is greater than the setback required for cottages. We really don't have an issue with the 30 meter, but once again, for those people that already have their trailers established in compliance with the existing bylaws, to now make them after the fact, have to move the trailers back from where they've been located, to me would be a little bit onerous. So we think that a grandfathering clause for that section as well would also be in order. There's only one other item. I know it's been really long for you guys tonight, so I'm trying to be as brief as I can with this. There is a prohibition for the location or licensing of a trailer on any vacant land in any mixed zone. Now, so there's many rural properties in the area that have frontage on either the lakes or the rivers, and it's not uncommon for those properties, particularly along the lakes as instituted by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. There'll be a thin strip of land either across the entire frontage or a portion of the frontage where the land is below the 100-year storm flood contour for that water body. And in those areas, you know, you may still have 100 acres of land, but a very small, thin little sliver. Well, that constitutes a mixed zone. You would have rural plus the hazard zone or the little strip of land. So I think if we simply changed it to say that it would be permitted in a mixed zone as long as the zone category that is permissive of the trailers was of sufficient size to accommodate the trailer, the land use, and the septic system within that land, then I think that also avoids a fair bit of conflict and challenge. So those are the few areas that we see where the bylaw, in our opinion, could be improved. And we would urge you to you know, at least reconsider those items. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. Next, we have Gina Langlois.
Hi, I'm gonna be shorter this time. Your worship and counselors and the public members. What made me come here today is on the draft trailer bylaw is a gentleman that was here at a meeting I attended, and how he had had his trailer on a piece of property for 30 years. My heart kind of went out to him because I can't imagine if that happened to me or to a member of my family that they were told it was no longer permissible. Again, as a member, I'm also a member of the planning advisory committee. So I'm not, you know, part of my duty is to try not to be biased in one direction, but to look at the whole picture. So I was kind of opposing this bylaw because the bylaw itself is excessive. It discriminates from people of other zoning. And what I have a hard time dealing with is a person, I can go take my trailer and go on Crown land beside a lake for 21 days, right beside a lake. I don't need septic approval. I don't need gray water. I'm allowed to go there for 21 days because they trust that you're going to know how to deal with your own human waste and gray water and be a responsible person. And so it's used on Crown land without facilities throughout the province. There's other ways of disposing of waste appropriately. So how can a municipality, unless it's in a subdivision agreement, I agree with that because you knew that when you bought the property, but I'm talking other than a subdivision agreement where it's stated, how can they tell someone that owns property that you pay taxes on that you can't put your own trailer there for 21 days? It's your own property.
Yeah.
But it's your right. But yet I could go down the road and put my trailer right beside a nice lake, but I have to tell my children, oh no, you can't bring that trailer here. And the other thing is, have you ever tried to get a park site in a provincial park? My husband was recently speaking with a nurse and she was trying to go camping. She got a camping spot for one night. So here I am with a vacant piece of waterfront property that I can say to somebody that wants to come and visit at my house, and I can say, okay, park your trailer next door, but I'm not allowed to do that. I got to say, good luck, go try and find a camping spot. So I guess I'm asking, does this make common sense to anyone? Thank you. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Tina. Next, we have Marcy Dewey.
I'm reading the
Oh, you
next
have
two.
her letter?
So for Marcy Dewey, I'm reaching out to let council know we are in full support of the RV bylaw and short-term rental bylaws that are being brought forward. As council has heard a lot from me about RVs on vacant lots, and we are not in favor of licensing. We were not in favor of licensing. I have waited a very long time for council to be as transparent and to do something to help our lakes from the pollution that has went on far too long in my area. I think this is a fair balance that council is trying to achieve. I appreciate a council that is taking action and improvements to our community, protecting our water and feeling heard as a homeowner. Council and staff have established rules and regulations and done it with respect to others. Council and staff has done a great job at explaining process and procedures and have given very many chances to hear from public. We couldn't be happier with council and staff. I hope moving forward that council supports staff and enforcement process after the bylaws pass. My expectations are very positive, but I do believe that it will be difficult for staff and rules only work when enforced and supported.
Thank you. Pat Kelly,
Yeah, so he didn't want to read it, so I'll just.
you reading Pat?
Well, it's difficult to read it because it's just in point view, and it was from the corporate services meeting. I didn't see I just from viewing the corporate services meeting, but if all the counselors could view it, it'd be fine.
They do, yeah, everybody has a copy. of
Okay,
this.
then that's fine.
Okay, so you're going with me not reading?
No, fine.
You're not reading?
No.
Do you want our
No.
CAO to read?
No, it's fine because it's all in point form. I don't think you'd be able to understand it.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, very good. Okay, at this point, everyone's had the opportunity to present their thoughts and their opinions, and you have given us a lot to look at, a lot to think about, and a lot to do before we go further ahead. Nobody ever said this job was easy, let me tell you, sitting here and listening to everybody. Saying what they think about it, giving their opinion. So at this point, council will certainly have to look at every opinion that came to us, every presentation, and to look at the big picture. It's not looking at any one person, it's to look at what is affecting everybody. So we do have a planning board, we have our corporate services, and we have council. So we have our homework cut out for us. But thank you very much for bringing forward all of the issues tonight. And I want to say thank you for that. Next, we're going to move on to a report from our planning administrator with respect to purchase of the Shore Road allowance.
I think there might be an exodus. We might go on a given minute.
Hmm?
There might be a bunch of people leaving.
Good night.
Mind if I go get a glass of water real quick?
Oh, well, yeah, you could fill
Yeah,
mine up.
sure, of course I do.
I'll have another two.
Anybody else want a break for a minute? You wanna go?
No.
You're good. You want a break? You want water or anything? No, you're good. It's warm in here. But I know you can't hear if the air conditioner's on. I think those windows open, though, don't they?
Yeah. Well, I could open that door, Jim. I could prop that door open and let it
Might be a
breeze
good
through.
idea.
Yeah, so over the bridge.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Jacob.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. Jason.
You're welcome.
Matt's gone to prop the door open.
Perfect.
I don't know, you have a fan there.
Pop the door open and then we'll all get eaten in the library mosquitoes.
Yeah.
If I get bit by a single mosquito, I'll use it. That's a
Okay,
big
I wrote
one.
on
You're
that
worried
one.
about one mosquito, right? One.
That was mine.
Good night.
Good night, guys.
Paul left his code here. Preston?
Hmm?
Paul left his code here.
Oh, okay, I can
Yeah.
take it into him when I go to work.
Oh, okay, perfect. Take care.
Thanks.
Yeah, she's right here.
Right there.
18.
Time is it now?
8:39. Wow,
Well, I
that's
was
funny.
pretty on, eh? I said an hour and a half.
By my watch, you got 6 minutes to wrap this up. No. just kidding. There you go.
Yeah.
Maybe he's just squatting away the mosquitoes. It's very natural. Here's Steve's threat.
There's a recess.
Okay, we're good. Okay. We have a report from our planning administrator with respect to purchase of the Shore Road Allowance, file RA 3/2024.
Mr. Regan has approached the township to purchase the shore road allowance in front of 464 and 462 Shields Point Road. After evaluating the property with our policies and procedures and the official plan for the sale and closure of Lakeshore roads, it does follow the policy. The proposed application is not located in an area of public access for recreational purposes. The shoreline road allowance does not abut fish habitat or wildlife habitat. The shoreline road allowance is within the development constraint zone and is protected by the North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority and will require a DIA permit if future development is to occur. There is no public interest in the said lands as the adjacent owner is private land owned by Mr. Regan, and both abutting neighbors have agreed and signed the lot line extension authorization forms. Further, section 5 of bylaw 2013-13 provides that council shall determine that the subject shoreline road allowance is surplus to the needs of the municipality, and that the shoreline road allowance is not one which is reserved with the above section 2 of the same bylaw and official plan. The application meets the requirements of when not to sell shoreline road allowances apart from the development constraint zone that is regulated by North Bay Mattawa Conservation Authority. Bylaw 2013-13, section 3.6 further describes that lands that are subject to flooding and other hazards may be sold. However, any construction or placement of fill on these lands will be subject to the approval of the Ministry of Natural Resources and or where applicable, the Conservation Authority. Considerations for council is to, 1, deem the land surplus to the needs of the municipality, which has been determined through the process of evaluating the subject application against the official plan and the policies of bylaw 2013-13. 2, accept in principle the purchase of the shoreline and road allowance, abutting properties with conditions if applicable, the closure and disposition of the shoreline road allowance, abutting the properties legally described as concession 10 part lot 34, registered plan 36R-10855, parts 1 and 3, parcel 29141, and concession 10 part lot 34 plan NR 22051, part 4, parcel 22013, locally known as 462 and 464 Shields Point Road. Option 3, there is no premise when considering bylaw 2013-13 and the official plan that would provide council a reason not to accept the application in principle or deem the land surplus to the municipality. However, the concept of approval in principle is to ensure the legal team reviews the proposal and conducts the necessary research to ensure there are no unknown considerations prior to council passing the final bylaw approving the sale of the shoreline of the road allowance.
Any questions? No? We have a motion. Moved by Councillor McGuinness, second by Councillor Featherstone. Whereas Jack Reagan has requested to purchase a portion of the township's shoreline road allowance directly abutting the property located at 462 and 464 Shields Point Road, Bonfield, Ontario, and that furthermore, that council deems the land surplus to the needs of the township through evaluation following the policies and procedures in section 3.6 of the official plan and bylaw 2013-13. Whereas council approves of the purchase of the shoreline road allowance abutting 462 and 464 Shields Point Road in principle, and that the planning administrator proceed accordingly, and further in accordance with bylaw 2013-13, Jack Reagan shall be responsible for all disbursements incurred by the township and shall submit the required deposit prior to the commencement of legal work. All in favor? Carried. Next, we have the adoption of committee minutes and motions. Corporate Services Committee, no minutes for this session. Emergency Services Committee, we did have a meeting, no motions. Planning Advisory Committee, no minutes for this session. Recreation Committee, no minutes for this session. Police Services Board, no minutes for this session. The Recreation Committee, Steve is our chair. Do you have anything to talk about for July 1st?
Yeah, Canada Day, so we're like 11 till 5, somewhere around in there, at this facility, like at the park. So we moved our fireworks to the end of the summer. So we have an event Labor Day weekend. But for this event, we have a lot going on, like the Mayor's Barbecue, and we have different bands coming in and different vendors. Now the group that's running the marketplace and the fair, they're here as well. So we have a lot going on for Canada Day for that time period.
So you all heard, come out for Canada Day. I'm going to cook.
And are you gonna cook this year?
Jason always cooks.
You're too busy chatting and sing.
We'll see you on Monday, July 1st, right? It's a Monday.
Yeah.
All right, so next we have a concerned items for council discussion, and it's Michael Wilson burning permit fee concern. Is Michael here? No? Did you want to speak to that?
I can do, is there a letter you're reading or not reading? Correspondence. Okay, so I can speak to it for sure. So received correspondence, not just from one gentleman, but others, with respect to the burning permit bylaw, the proposed burning permit bylaw, with some good points that council I think should consider. One being the $10 fee for the license or the permit to be able to burn for the year in a residential burn fire, that we should look to eliminate that fee, as well as perhaps even looking to implement it that the objective is to make sure that people understand the rules, the policy for safety, how far back it needs to be set back, the size of the fire that they can have. That perhaps if somebody was to, I think that there should still be a permit that they need to get. It can be free of charge. Really what we're seeking is the ability to know that they have read and understood the terms, that in order for property owners to have fires on their property, that it would make sense that, in my opinion, that the homeowner would get that permit one time, would last for the lifetime that they own that property. If the property sells, the new owner would have to come in if they desired to have fires and apply for that permit again, but at no cost. So, Your Worship, I guess, fear of rambling on, which I think is too late at this point, I would suggest that we defer the third reading of this motion, perhaps asking staff to come back with some of those changes if council would concur with that thought process, that we could consider some of those points.
Okay, I'll go to that motion. I did skip one, I'm sorry, with the emergency, so I will go back after. But for the third reading for the open fire burning. And it was moved by Councillor Featherstone and seconded by Councillor McGinnis. Sometimes I can't read their writing. The bylaw 2024-27 being a bylaw to regulate open air burning in the township of Bonfield be read a third time in open council and passed this 25th day of June. And you're asking that we defer this to
Would
give
be my recommendation to the rest of the council.
I concur.
everybody good with that?
I mean, I don't think $10 is making or breaking anybody, but if that's what we want to do, it's defer it and talk about it and figure it out and bring it back, then we can do that.
Okay, I'm gonna say this. $10, we can't do much with the $10, and if our concern is for safety, and I believe that the homeowners should be the ones to purchase the permit and be responsible if there's any fires on their property, to oversee it and to make sure that it's safe, not only for their own home. You have to consider the homes around you and make sure that if a fire is going there, that it's under control. Not all that long ago, there was a big fire back off Talon Lake Road, and about 3 weeks ago, there was a fire that the fire department was called out to again on Talon Lake Road. So if it's a deterrence to purchase that or to come in and get that permit for the $10 that we have had people speak to it, then I'm all in favor of looking at it and possibly not charging the $10. So yes.
Yes, so the $10, I guess, is neither here nor there for me. It's the annual, that troubles me. So if it's a one-time fee of $10 and it lasts the life of you and your home, I'm okay with that.
Well, that might be something to consider.
Yeah, so that it's not
Until you-
annually. Why would someone come back every year after we know that they've signed off?
That would be something for our staff to
Yes.
consider as well.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so in this instance, then we're going to defer this, right? Now I'll move back for a moment. The Emergency Services Committee, moved by Councillor Featherstone, second by Councillor McGinnis. Whereas the Emergency Services Committee recommended to Council that both water delivery policies be sent to the CAO staff and legal to produce a report for Council on feasibility of water delivery services for ponds, excluding pools. Be it hereby resolved that Council approves of this recommendation. All in favor? Carried.
I think raise your hand. Just Steve.
The Russians didn't vote in favor of it.
What happened?
Nobody voted in favor but Steve.
Oh,
I got 4 votes. How many votes I get?
I'll ask again. All in favor? Okay, so then we're defeated on this one. That's a long night. All right.
Yeah, you just about did.
Now, we'll bring Elmer and Karen, where I fit you in here for your presentation.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I don't know where to.
So can I interrupt just for a moment?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yeah.
May I approach the bench?
Approach the bench, please. Your motions?
Yeah.
So because it's not following procedure, can we suspend the procedure rule so you can allow this? Sure, when.
Have a good night.
You pass this motion.
Okay, in order to, to give you the opportunity to present your,
There, want me to sit down?
so we
It'll only take a second.
Yeah.
moved by, Counselor Featherstone, second by Counselor Corbett. Whereas the procedural bylaw 2023-48 sets out rules for conduct and procedures at all council meetings, and whereas section 2.3 permits council to suspend the rules with a 2/3 vote in favor. Now therefore, council suspends section 15.2 that no person shall speak at council unless placed on the agenda and with the permission of the mayor. All in favor? Okay,
Now we're legal.
Now we're. yeah.
no, now you can proceed.
Well, thank you very much. Hello, Annie, and thank you to your honor and council for meeting with us this evening. My name's Karen Gagne, and for those of you who don't know me, because I know there's new people on this council and people that are not possibly familiar with me. Excuse me. I've been a long-term businesswoman in this area. I'm not going to say how long because that would date me, but a long-term businesswoman. Grown up in business and relish. I am also a big advocate for economic development and have been on certain boards that I've sat on throughout the last 30 years. I would like to introduce our directors, and then I'll tell you what we're going to be doing. Lise Houle is our secretary. There she is. She's very shy, but she's waving. Mr. Stephen Philpott is our president. One who needs no introduction, Mr. Elmer Rose is our vice president and historian. And myself, I will be the treasurer. We are the newly formed Steel Rail Committee.
Mayor wanted to just.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. It's very,
Smile.
Want an extra 15 minutes?
I had a small, I had an operation on my throat yesterday morning,
Oh
so,
my goodness.
yeah, so they just took some biopsies out or whatever, so that's why I'm. And Jerry's very happy that I can't speak there. So we are the newly formed Steel Rail Committee, comprised of volunteers from our area with a mandate to preserve our culture and historical ties to the railway transcontinental construction project dated from 1881 to 1885 and ending in Rutherglen, Bonfield Township. Here in all of Canada, this is where it ended. May I add that Bonfield Township has also been recognized by the Canadian Railroad Hall of Fame. So that's very interesting. And I believe you have a plaque.
Yeah, there is a plaque.
There is a plaque, yes.
One with a plaque around
Stating
it.
that, yes. We have in our possession a multitude of undocumented history records that have not yet been properly archived or honed. Hence, one of our future endeavors is to build a museum to house these artifacts. Thus, our request tonight is to become a subcommittee of council to basically undertake to educate the area in regards to the courage, the resilience, and humanity of our predecessors, while promoting the unique culture and economy of our township. We are also becoming a nonprofit organization. We are in the throes of that now, legally. I will now have the other members of the committee make their presentation to you, beginning with our president, Stephen Houle. Thank you.
you. Mayor and council, thank you very much for allowing our group the opportunity to speak with you this evening. My name is Steve Philpott, and I have addressed council once before with respect to the steam locomotive excursion train. Fire Up 503 group is moving forward with its efforts to get the engine up and going. Part of that plan may see the 503 locomotive sit as a partially restored stationary display for a short time to create some support and raise funds. Last year, when 503 group asked for your letter of support for the excursion effort, I volunteered to be the link between the train guys and Bonfield. I am not a train guy. I kind of stumbled into it through just wanting to be a photographer for the process. But I've made it clear to 503, and 503 people agree that any projects that I should be involved with would be solely for Bonfield Township's benefit and at the approval of council, train or no train. So the general history of Bonfield Township to me is actually pretty interesting. A school lesson on the region might not only reflect the development of Northern Ontario, but Canada itself. Things like the movement of tectonic plates forming our rivers, and then Indigenous culture, French, English, Métis culture, fur traders, explorers, loggers, miners, railroaders, and farmers, all having their place and time in that chronology. But what about the individuals, everyday society builders who existed in and woven into that framework of key events, key populations, living and working over those years? People like us trying to adjust and survive in an ever-evolving world. Now, I'm learning about all the artifacts, names, events, and personalized tales that Elmer Rose has quietly preserved over the years. For a small community, I think you're very, very lucky to have all his stories of the in-between people, stories which could transform that basic classroom history lesson into an enthralling saga that would move from the beginning, from those tectonic plates right through to the days we're living in right now. Excuse me, I'm ahead of myself. Yes, stories that, if delivered well, could inspire all of us, locals and visitors, to recognize that we ourselves did not magically appear here, but are the product of a lot of blood, sweat, tears, failure, joy, laughter, love. We should pass these stories on with an intensity, I think, to gain healthier perspectives on the life that we lead today. Prior to addressing council last year, Elmer and I had already met. Elmer then introduced me to Karen Gagnon and Lise Poole, and since that time we have spent many hours in Karen's studio as the Steel Rails Group, discussing just what to do with the amount of research that Elmer has collected over the years, and how we might use history and any other ways to promote local pride in the township's past and set a positive feeling for the future. So we have put together a wish list, a number of goals that the Steel Rails would like to work toward with council's permission and direction. Karen has already mentioned that we're incorporated, and the reason for that incorporation is to have a way and opportunity to completely finance everything that we have going to mention, and anything else that the Steel Rails Group might do beyond that as the years go on. The goals are an audio recording of Elmer's Township history that can be used on cell phones for driving, walking, or cycling tours. We'd like to produce a monument, I guess you say, or display a 13-foot high railroad spike showing 10 feet above the ground. So you can imagine the other 3 feet below. To commemorate the eastern terminus of where we sit right now of the CPR Transcontinental Construction Project. A memorial tribute with storyboards to those who settled and developed recognition from Ontario and or Canadian governments in the form of a plaque with respect to the eastern terminus. And to create a museum where Elmer's and all other historical records and artifacts can be safely stored and viewed. And also add Trans-Canada Highway signs that reflect this proud and growing community. And to that end, we offer our services as volunteers, and that we may be included as a subcommittee of council. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
No. I'll give my 5 minutes now. So.
Elmer Rose.
Well, folks, I don't have any written speech or like that, but thank you, Ms. Mayor and councilors for having us here tonight to try to develop something here in the town of Bonfield. Now, I'm not picking on Neri because she's a longtime resident. She was born and raised here like all the rest of us and that. I'm picking on the 4 councilors here. They're all newcomers and they don't know what's out the backyard of in their backyard, so to speak. So we would like to bring you a little history lesson, give you an update what I've done over the last 55 years. And I find it quite thrilling that when somebody's looking for an ancestor, a grave, or a location, it comes through this office. This office sends them to me. And in the last 2 years, I've reclaimed 18 different situations, I guess you'd want to call it, grave sites or locations of where their great grandfathers first settled. And we returned the 2 back to their grandchildren or whatever that's requiring for the history of it. And I get a big pleasure out of that. And the wife gets mad at me on the computer there. We hear the same bullshit over and over. But it's a big pleasure to be able to help families out, generating the past and at the same time learning about our footsteps here in Bonfield, Rutherglen. So on behalf of our committee, I would like to donate you guys a little plaque, and I think you got another wall there that can handle that. And over the years, everybody said, "Oh, we don't know where the first spike is. We don't know when, how, where, and what." And that's not true. It's all out there. You now have a picture of the first spike. Old Rutherglen was right up here in the field, which nobody ever knew that Rutherglen was originally 4 miles west of where it is today. And right around the corner was the first yard for CP or CCR to come up here into Bonfield. And so I'd like to present this to you as a safekeeping and something you can hang on your wall with plaque. That picture was taken by Steve Philpott. And this picture here is for, we'll put it on Nikki's desk maybe, it's a picture of the first spike at night. And that was Mr. Jasmine has kind of donated that to us. Folks, we have so many local people wanting to get in on this archive museum thing that I think we have the backing of our community. Plus, I have been asked by Mr. Horstman, which was vice president of Via Rail, to write up a story for him and that, which I turned down because I didn't figure I had the education to do it. But now I'm wishing I did do it. And so we're going to be reaching out to CP Rail, which this is the birthplace. This is where CP Rail started, right here between Rutherglen and Bonfield. And we're also going to hit Via Rail. And they will be our sponsors, hopefully. If not, we'll take another direction, but it's not gonna cost the taxpayer 1 cent. It's all gonna be volunteered and hopefully tie in with the 503 out of North Bay. In my basement, 1/3 of my basement's all in history files and pictures. I have over 1,500 pictures. And my family's not really interested in it. Actually, my daughter said, take it to the dump, Dad. But I'm very safety minded when I'm handing out my files and my information. Because I had one lady in Vancouver said, I got just exactly what you need, and for X number of dollars, I will send it out to you. So I said, give me a sample. It was my own material, a complete circle. BC to here. So you gotta be careful when you're giving out stuff. Tonight, I'm also giving you a 55-page booklet, all about how Rutherglen and Bonfield was developed. With names, dates, everything that you might need for an archive. And this is only a small sample now. I got 35 other bins at home that we can add to this. But this will give you the basic rundown of how this town was developed. And now I'm going to pick on the councilors here. Donna.
Yes.
Did you realize your yard was where the Georgian Bay Canal was supposed to go through?
On Pine Lake?
Right in your yard.
Oh.
1901. You'll see the test holes there just to the north end of your
Did
property.
you know that my father worked for CN Rail for 30 years?
Right on.
I'm a train baby, and my most prized possession when he retired was a gold spike. He's got a gold spike on a plaque, and it is one of
Great.
my most prized possessions.
I'm the 4th generation of CP Rail, and my grandfather is what brought the railroad here to town. And his picture's in here too. Jason, your property.
Yes, sir.
Do you know what's in the backyard? Or who owned it? Who first owned it?
I do not.
The name was Francis Cloutier. He was brought up from Montreal by CP Rail to come here as the Walmart greeter. He also was the first station agent here in Bonfield. And it was his job to come to meet the train and all the new immigrants or whatever to come into the township of Bonfield to establish their settlement and to show them around. And then there was Alphonse Levesque. Now, Alphonse was sent up here by CPR and the Ontario government, or I guess the Ontario government, you want to call it. He came out of Montreal, and he was supposed to come up here as a school teacher. Well, he ended up being the surveyor and lawyer of this town. All your lots here are surveyed off with chains, not instruments. There's not one lot the same, and there's some of the lines are not.
That's true.
Oh, we know.
It was all set up some problems. So that was Mr. Alphonse Levesque. Now, Bonfield was named Levesqueville for about 3 or 4 months. And then he went up to Nonsensing, which was Quay camp, made a settlement there, and then from there he ended up into Astorville. You'll find his gravestone in Astorville Cemetery up there. It's a little Smith slab. He was quite famous as far as being a lawyer, and you'll find some of his contracts in here too. His grandson still lives in North Bay and has the complete diary. And so Cloutier, Levesque, all our streets are named after them, and they came out of here. Now we'll go to Steve here. I don't have too much on you, Steve.
I'm trying to cheat.
I do know that was a 100-acre farm once upon a time. And there was quite a family raised there. And you have what, maybe 25 building lots off that one farm there now?
So-
You take the lakeshore frontage in there and everything?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
We're down to 12 acres.
Yep.
The cool thing about our property is the arches that are at the front of our house, you can find the same ones off of Lakeshore. Because the gentleman that built our house, built it for like a horse ranch.
Yep.
And he had a trail that went down to the lake to run his horses down the lake to swim.
Yeah.
The same archway is down at the lake.
That's all modern history. I'm talking 120 years. In the back of this book here, and these guys can photocopy it, has all the registered land around 1897, 1884, with the dates and everything when the land was registered, with the names who first settled here in Bonfield. That's all right here in this book. Now we're going to go to Dan, my neighbor.
Sorry about that.
Dan, all the digging that you've been doing around your place there, and you've got a beautiful spot. We admire You ever find any graves?
No, none yet.
Okay, you know, you're lucky. The Brown family came in from the Ottawa Valley and settled there. They did not suffer the plague or whatever came through here with the Spanish flu and all this and that. A lot of our kids have been buried in farmers' fields. They weren't allowed to take them off the property. Between your place and Pleasant Road, which is not including the graveyard now, there's 158 graves known on these different properties, including the lady who was talking about her little business up the road. There's 3 graves there she doesn't know of on her property. Now, we got to start thinking, if we're going to start subdividing and bringing houses in and all this and that, yeah, we don't know these people that's buried there, but we still got to have the respect for those graves. So that's just another thing. Your barns were built in 1919 that you knocked down there. Mr. Pete Brown built those barns. He's from the Ottawa Valley Haley Station. He was one of the biggest maple syrup producers in the area. And my family used to go and work with them making this maple syrup. That was their source of sugar for the community around here. And just down the road, we had a big flour mill where everybody took their grain. And
Yeah, I've heard about the.
but that didn't work out because they didn't have enough water to play with. Anyhow, it's been a pleasure talking with you. I did want to have a very private meeting and go into history, because I could talk history all night here, and probably you'll say the same thing as my wife. And but it's true, she gets tired hearing the same stories over and over. The pictures behind you there, I think you'll find that those pictures were mine originally. Came from my collection. And if you look over here to your Bonfield map here, your Bonfield church, this is the second church that was built here. They dragged it actually from Shields' Point up to the Shanks' farm, and they gave up pulling with horses. And then they decided, well, they brought it up to the first spike. It was actually, they located the first Catholic church at the first spike. And right there is where the diocese of Sault Ste. Marie and Pembroke was made by Mr. Duhamel. You'll find it all in his book here. He stood where the bell tower was, and he blessed the grounds for the first spike and the village of Rutherglen, Old Rutherglen, and made the diocese up there. Over the years, the diocese has changed a little bit boundaries, but that's basically where it was. So if you go from the footing here to the steeple here is 100 feet. And that was built by J.R. Booth. J.R. Booth actually jump-started the town here. And right here, he had a big dock. He had a warehouse here. He had his a big store here, magazine. And right here is where the old hotel was. And in the back here, you can see the building. He kept 11 to 13 horses harnessed at all times. So if anything happened in the bush between the Blue Sea and Chisholm, they were on standby, ready to go. And the blacksmith shop is right there. So, yeah, so we had payroll office, we had everything. J.R. Booth was here in 1859, whereas CP Rail came in here in 1882. The first train was August 1882 when I passed through Bonfield. The first train was not going past Bonfield. It was going to come up here for with supplies to J.R. Booth and take back his logs. His logs was taken 1 year from the time he left the dam here to hit his mill at Ottawa. Take 1 year for it to float his logs down there. So he thought, well, we'll get a train system going here and it'll be a little quicker. It was a little quicker. And a lot of time people would come down and old Booth himself would be pushing logs down through the slide. Now, you know where your dam is. That was a wooden dam once upon a time. The water was actually 3 feet higher. So we would be standing in water right now when he was pushing logs down. So this is just some of my little bit of material that I've been doing over the years. I would like to share it with my community, and hopefully we can get something going as far as an archive or a museum. And I'm very fortunate to have directors that's really backing me on this, because for 23 years I've been trying to get this off the ground. Mayor Paquette recognized me with a certificate, so did Ken Bean, past council. Vic Fideli has given me his thanks and everything for what I've been doing. I've been the director with the Ottawa Museum for 6 years. I was 3 years as president. And when we started out, we didn't know how we're gonna pay our curator. On the day I left there, they had $13,500 in the bank after 3 years of taking it over. So I leave it with you tonight, and thank you so much for having us. And enjoy this book, and if you wish to photocopy, you can go ahead with, you have my permission for my files. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And I'll just have, thank you, Elmer. I'll just have some parting words.
So far.
Now you see why, when Elmer and Steve asked me, pulled me in, and I said, well, I have a little bit of train background, not a lot, but and then we pulled Lise in, because she's just amazing. I believe in them. I believe in them. I believe that eventually we're gonna have that 503, we're gonna have that locomotive come down from North Bay and come all the way around, and it'll bring economic development to this area, and it'll bring history back on rails, back on the tracks. So please, we hope you join forces with us, using the history to build on our future.